The computer probably does that. I just need to try to.
Good evening, everybody. It's 5:30 on March 11th. We're gonna call the meeting to order for the Charter Review Commission for 2025.
All right, Ms. Berger?
Here.
Ms. Crawford?
Here.
Ms. Heller?
Here.
Mr. Mintz?
Here.
Mr. Hochberg?
Here.
Ms. Stark?
Here.
Mr. Thomas?
Here.
7 present. We have a quorum.
Next item on the agenda this evening is to approve the minutes of the previous meeting. So moved.
Second.
Motion by Joe to approve the minutes and a second by Nancy.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Ms. Crawford?
Yes.
Ms. Berger?
Yes.
Ms. Heller?
Yes.
Mr. Mintz?
Yes.
Mr. Hochberg?
Yes.
Ms. Stark?
Yes.
7 yeas, minutes pass.
Sorry, I had something to say about the minutes. Probably should have mentioned that before we did the. I wanted to point out that under council meeting schedule, the question that I asked, and admittedly, I should have addressed this at the meeting last month because the question that I asked, the answer that I received didn't really answer my question. But I let it go. And then I read the minutes over the weekend and I went, yeah, that's not exactly the question that I asked. I don't know if it matters or not, but I thought since it's on public record.
Absolutely. So what is the section? Just so I'm clear whenever I go in and edit it.
Yep. Under,
Section 3.05.
Fourth bullet.
Talking about the council meeting schedule at the bottom section.
right,
Okay.
and it wasn't so much about the flexibility as the, I guess, vagueness of it all. Looking at Pataskala, New Albany and Dublin, they made mention of having at least one meeting per month. And I was just questioning that, like maybe we wanted something similar in the language. So that's all.
Make those edits and I'll get those out to everybody.
The next item on the agenda this evening is to review the plan of work, which is part of the schedule. So tonight's order of business, we'll be looking at Articles 5, the section covering the mayor, and Article 6 covering the administrator or the city manager.
I did want to point out, so we did have public comments, much like we did last meeting. They are in your packet. It's the page with the red text. That is again from Mr. Holler, who sent in public comments last time. This is just part of the same document that he sent in. So he is not here for the public comments, but we did get some of those in for these articles tonight. So that's what those are.
Perfect. We'll walk through and address the public comments as we get to them.
Mhm.
And with that, we'll hand it off to Miss Rebecca.
Okay, thank you. Just a reminder, we have Articles 5 and 6 this evening and then spring break and pick back up April 8th. And then we'll finish up. Couple of other points on the work plan. As we go through, we're finding there are some things that we need to go back to tweak to match the decisions that you've made. And so we'll be doing a follow-up to kind of make sure that everything syncs as we go through. You'll notice in your packet this evening, one of the things, depending on what we end up with in terms of the cycle of council elections, obviously there'll be a transitional provision that'll match that. Right now, I've got it in brackets because we haven't quite sorted that out. So just wanted to mention that. Similarly, when we get to the procedure for suspension or removal of the city manager, once we settle on that language, we'll have to go back and pick up with clerk of council and have a similar kind of provision. So just want you to know we're kind of going backwards and forwards, just making sure everything syncs. And of course, you will get a final marked copy of the entire charter to approve so that you can double check us and make sure everything's addressed. So with that, we can go to Article 5. And before we get started, there were some questions that had come up that perhaps we can just mention at the get-go. One is on military powers, which is very interesting. And I had never done a deep dive on that before. So suffice it to say, went back and looked at the revised code, and our opinion is that these would stay with the mayor. And the reason is twofold. First, there is a revised code provision, Ohio Revised Code provision 705.59, which is the authority to have a city manager plan of government. And military powers is not one of the listed duties of a city manager. And I think that's pretty good guidance. Separate from that, there's another Ohio Revised Code section, 733.03, that provides that the mayor is the chief conservator of peace within the city. It's kind of poetic. So we kept military powers with the mayor. And that is parallel to what New Albany has, just for a cross-reference. So there's that. Another point, speaking of New Albany, the New Albany mayor had recommended that economic development discussions be held in executive session of council. I'm not sure that's necessary. There's a revised code provision in the Sunshine Law that specifically addresses economic development discussions. And in consultation with Mr. Bream, we kind of agreed that it would just be repeating the statute, and why put it in the charter? I don't know if there's something you wanted to add to that.
Well, that, and when I actually read through their charter, it's not in their charter.
Yeah, and that-
So I know it's important to them, and it is important. We use it same way they do with all the development and things we have. It's an important tool to be able to talk about these things. But they're doing it by revised code. It's not because it's in their charter, as far as I can see. I didn't find it in there, so.
So with that, if you'll turn to Article 5. We made edits, some of which we talked about before, in terms of the mayor serving as president of council. Number 6, we would suggest, comma, unless otherwise delegated to the city manager, because there could be something else that comes up and it just provides some flexibility there. And then we've already talked about the military powers.
And number 3, again, this is what Joe spoke to you about, I think, at one of our first meetings, if not the first one, was the whole idea that right now the police department is under the mayor. He just said that's really tough. It's tough for me. You know, it needs to be the city manager who's here all the time, who completely reports to council. And you're going to see we've beefed up the provision about how the city manager serves and at the pleasure of council. So a lot of accountability there, but day to day, as we grow, this was his recommendation. So important, really important change there. But again, back to, it's great to be in a situation where you've got the city manager and mayor who recognize it. And even though it's the mayor that's actually going to lose control, so to speak, he's the one that says, I shouldn't have that anymore. It's just not healthy.
A question on that, Dave.
Yep.
So in the current setup under the current charter, the police department reports to the mayor. The mayor is a day job function. Like he's not working a full-time job here. He's got another job, has a family. But changing that to where the police department reports to the city manager, is there any reporting structures that we need to account for? Are we setting ourselves up for some other kind of loss of coverage in the after hours or off hours or weekends? Or
I don't know that it's any different than what it would be with the mayor. I mean, everybody goes home in the evening. Both the mayor and the city manager are, first shift.
They're always on call,
quote,
right?
But they're always on call.
easy?
So I keep that in mind. I don't want to dismiss that out of hand, but my initial reaction would be, I don't think there's much difference there. But something to keep an eye on as we move through this.
Understood. Thanks.
Does it make sense to add the same verbiage as line 6? The city manager can delegate in case there's a loss of control or something like that, kind of catch all?
Well, we hadn't talked about that in the context of the city manager. This goes to being chief spokesperson.
Yeah.
My concern in doing that part is if you read through, and I have being part of the original charter, the mayor is required to be a resident of Sunbury, but the city manager does not. So like the mayor's going to be here or is a phone call away, whereas the city manager may not be as local or as quick to respond or to be able to get here should that need be there. So having the police department reporting to the city manager that may or may not be in this space.
Is that a place where we suggest a change that the city manager should be a local or within a certain distance or something?
That would be an option, but then you're going to limit your pool of opportunity. That's the blessing and
Okay.
curse of these conversations.
Yeah, if you flip over to 6.02, look at subsection B. That is what was provided for previously.
And that part was updated under number 2, where it said that where they excluded the police department out. So that part would be struck out. So the police department and all departments would report to the city manager.
I think
They're not-
to the previous point though, just to respond to that. I do think it becomes relevant when they consider their city manager. I don't know. I think I agree with whoever said it, to make them a resident. I'm afraid we'd be limiting our applicant.
It's true.
I mean, Daryl was transitioning. He came from another state, so he had to move. So he was in a unique circumstance where he could pick where he needed to move to. But if we were hiring somebody, which is not unusual to have applicants that are within central Ohio that, maybe are at a smaller municipality or they want to move to Sunbury for all the reasons that we all like it here, but maybe they're 15 minutes away and they don't want to pull their kids out of the school they're in to come here.
Right.
But I think it's relevant when it comes to, response times. As a practical matter, the city manager has to respond to stuff after hours that's not police related. I mean, if there's a sewer break or, if there's something dealing with streets, snow removal, I think that those calls already exist. So, but again, it's a good point and something that, as we hire, that's part of the qualifications. And we've done that in the past, that you need to reside, within a certain response time.
And that is the type of thing you could put in the contract.
Yes.
And like right now, sorry to interrupt, if for whatever reason the mayor in current situation, if you can't get a hold of him or he's out of the state for a funeral, who's the backstop? And I'm sure that there's a check and balance in place now. So I'm sure that could be set. Like who's the vice, who's the, just in case. I can't imagine there wouldn't be, for those situations.
I would say this is and the mayor could not be here tonight. He had a family issue that he had to deal with. One of his sons apparently, and his wife's not in town, I think had a fall and maybe they're in the hospital.
Oh, no. Life happens.
Getting a bone looked at. But that might be something that we have him comment on. I know he's planning on being here. Comment on the next meeting, what's your reaction to that?
Yeah, I just maybe add a couple things. I mean, it's a practical matter right now. The police chief does call me after hours. Maybe he doesn't call me as often as he calls the mayor at the moment, but it's not it's not infrequent that I'll hear from the chief after hours about an event that's occurred. So living in the city, that's a very valid point, but I would, yeah, I mean, that discussion happened the last time. It sounds like, you would dramatically reduce the pool of potential applicants. And most communities are going away from the requirement to live local. So the final thing I guess I would add, and they've alluded to it, the lawyers have alluded to it already. The city manager serves at the pleasure of council. And if the city manager isn't being responsive to the police or issues or whatever during that, I mean, that's one of the factors that they could consider, not only in the hiring process, but also in the removal process.
Yeah.
So, there are ways to make sure that you're getting the attention you need from the city manager.
Absolutely. And I don't mean to imply that there are issues, because I don't think that there are, but just laying out the foundation of what.
Yeah.
Also, can I bring up number 7, which if there are military powers at play, I would assume there's some sort of emergency. So if for whatever reason the mayor is incapacitated or otherwise unavailable, would it be helpful to add language in there that the city manager or president of council or somebody else would step in to help facilitate whatever emergency is happening at the time?
Maybe city
So
council.
the council president presides in the absence of the mayor. I mean, it doesn't give all the powers to the council president in the absence of the mayor, but maybe if the mayor is going to be away for an extended period of time. I mean, he usually makes a provision to make sure that the council president is aware of his absence from the community, so he can kind of step in, but he also let staff know that as well. So again, practically, it works now, whether or not you know.
Yeah, my only hesitation is the statute doesn't speak to delegation of power.
I think the fallback would be, I think it's good to have a backup, but I think the fallback would be the council president as acting mayor under 5.03. Since the state and federal call out mayor, well, the mayor's unavailable by our charter, the president pro tem is the acting mayor. So that's who would do it. That being said, I really hope we don't have a bunch of military. Never had that. I hope we don't.
Well, if we put it in here, then we won't need it,
That's-
right? That's how that works.
Did that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. If there's nothing else on 5.01, we took out the transitional provision in 02. Then we get over to subsection B. And we had some conversation about within B sub 1, hold office in a political party or be a delegate to a political party convention. And we had some First Amendment concerns about that, as well as just practical concerns. And Dave, I don't know if you want to elaborate.
This was something that I just brought up when I read through it. In my personal opinion, Sunbury is blissfully ignorant when it comes to party politics. I think this town would change forever if your seats or any seats were partisan. That has happened a lot of places. It's not here. And I have enjoyed being the law director for a group of people that are unidentified. And they're elected based on what they do and what they say and the decisions that they make. And that's great. So this was one thing that has, potentially political ramifications, and it's in the charter. We have had mayors in the past that have served as, on central committee for whichever party. We've got mayors that have been on both sides of the issue. So I just brought it up. I said, well, this is one place where the politic thing does come out. Do we want to think about that? Should it be in there or not? Again, Rebecca brought up First Amendment concerns. If somebody really wanted to do that, well, I'm elected as mayor. You're telling me I can't do that. Well, it's my right to be able to do that. And we just decided I couldn't. I think that the discussion amongst the administrative staff was we couldn't come up with a compelling enough a reason right now to take it out. If we had a compelling reason and after talking it through, we didn't, that outweighed what could be somebody's First Amendment rights. Again, when it talks about a political party or a delegate to a political party convention, I don't know how much that really is out in the public eye anyway, necessarily. But that was the conversation. So we decided to leave it.
Of the candidate.
On the ballot for the city, it's not.
No. The city's nonpartisan.
City's nonpartisan.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but,
Now, if they ran for central committee, yes, they're
Mhm.
running for one or the other.
but it's usually a big list of people. And
And I think where it could come back again to the First Amendment thing, Tobias would be somebody who really wants to run, and they're already on that, and then somehow there's a challenge to their candidacy. And I think we could have an issue. So after discussion, it was something that was discussed, but decided we couldn't find a compelling reason enough to just take it out, so we leave it in. That's not the bigger issue, I don't think.
And other than just conforming changes, for the rest of Article 5, that is it, unless, Mr. Chair, there's any further discussion anybody wants to have.
Further discussion from the committee?
Okay. Then we move to Article 6. Again, a lot of conforming kinds of changes, taking out police department, exceptions. The thing that we started to get into then is this relational issue between council and the city manager. So you see in 6.02A, council shall appoint. B, merit basis of appointment. And then, excuse me, also that the city manager shall not hold other public employment unless council approves. You get into 6.03, the city manager is substituted for administrator, pretty much the same. We had a cross-reference change. 6.04, acting city manager. A suggested change was rather than by letter, switch it for written correspondence. Because just depending, it might not be a letter. And then again, a bunch of conforming changes. 6.05 was where we really had a lot of discussion. And I want to just give you some background. There was a case out of the city of Cleveland, known as Loudermill, where there were two employees that alleged they were public employees that alleged that the city had terminated them without an opportunity to be heard. And the Loudermill case stands for that proposition, that a public employee cannot be terminated summarily. And so what we did was kind of rework 6.05 altogether to reference Loudermill. And so that is why it now reads, and suspensions also require an opportunity to be heard, may be suspended or removed, which shall include the reasons for suspension or removal. What we decided to get rid of were timeframes within 5 days, within 30 days, and so forth. And just simply say, to comply with this case, there'll be an opportunity to be heard, and not hamstring the city with trying to fit into a tight situation. Then it will go back to council. Council has to act by resolution to suspend or remove, include the reasons, provide the opportunity to be heard, and then go back and do a second resolution, a final resolution deciding what to do. Then we picked up with decision of council is in their sole discretion. And then a default to acting city manager. And of course, we have a provision just before this with respect to acting city manager. Now, I will tell you, there is a case currently pending in the Sixth Circuit of which we're a part. The question of whether administrative leave with pay requires a hearing too, or an opportunity to be heard rather. Not decided yet, still pending. So this is where we came out, and I don't know if, Mr. Chair, if you want to have further discussion about it, but that is, I wanted you to understand the reason why it's written like it's written.
So my understanding correctly that the city manager, no offense to you personally, would stay in position until such time there was opportunity at a council meeting or something to be heard. So it could potentially, taking out the dates and timeframes, could be a month or 60 days before something could occur.
Well, maybe Mr. Bloom wants to address the suspension versus removal.
Perfect, thank
You
you.
put your finger right on one of the major changes that we made. As it reads now, it says that they can suspend or remove the administrator upon notice, and that the administrator has the right to request a hearing. And then there's a legislative act to suspend or remove. The concern, and we talked with Daryl about this and he agreed, was, okay, if you're talking about removing your administrator, and we've had some controversial administrators, we've had some administrators do some controversial things, but it's never risen to the fact that other than a personality conflict, the whole council said we need to get rid of him or her, right? So to the extent, and we're kind of hypothesizing the worst case scenario, something terrible happened. And you said, I don't want
Or
that
comes to
person.
light.
Or
Excuse
comes
me.
to light, you find out about it, I say, they don't need to be over there another day. This now allows for the suspension or removal by resolution, and then the opportunity to be heard comes into play. So in that case, there could be a council meeting called, they could suspend that person pending the opportunity to be heard, and then make a determination on the final removal. The way it's worded now, really, it looked like for them to do anything, they had to allow them the opportunity to be heard, which has got all those timelines in. So, right, potentially you could have somebody say, well, I'm not leaving. I haven't had my opportunity to be heard. And so we decided that probably wasn't the best way to have it. Again, it was sample language. We pulled from one of the other charters that we saw that distinction. So that's one of the things that was done here. And it's kind of dovetails again with the comments Joe and Daryl have been making to you. You know, we really think we're transitioning into giving more power to the city manager, which is really the person that's here all the time. You know, we've got a manager, we've got an assistant city manager. We're kind of, you know, reallocating duties and also providing for those duties to be accomplished. But at the same token, we want to make darn sure that as we reallocate duties to the city manager, that that person is absolutely responsible to the elected city council. So. Any thoughts on it, Daryl? I know you're.
I think you've done a great job. So.
I have a question, not as serious as a suspension or removal, but backing it up to 6.04. I'm wondering if if there's a reason why, please help me understand. Just like if in the mayor's absence, the council president would be next in line. We have an assistant city manager. Why would that person not be delegated in the absence of our city manager?
Good question. And actually, I ran that same question through my mind when I was going through this. Here's what I came up with. Number one, we don't always have an assistant city manager. We do now, and it's great. Thank you. We had one previously. There was a time, and it's been a long time ago, that we had an assistant city manager. A lot of times, in the past, that position has not been filled. So this would allow, if the position's vacant, they can point to somebody. We don't have this now, but let's say you've got an assistant city manager that's just not ready. Assistant, they've only been in the job for 6 months and they don't have the experience that Caitlin has. Maybe that's not the person to be the acting until, you know, they get a little more seasoned. That's what I came up with. I would think, you know, all things being equal, if the position's filled and the person is, and the other, I guess another thing to think about would be if they're on some type of leave. You know, then he may need to put in writing, okay, Caitlin's out for whatever reason, long vacation or something, you know, this is who would be acting if I can't do it. But that's what I came up with.
That's the thing that's hard about this, is you're trying to run all the hypotheticals through your mind. And we just need to make sure there's coverage.
And trust me, I'm sitting here thinking, I helped write this thing 5 years ago.
Older and wiser.
That's why we review it.
This could be the shortest meeting on record. Are there questions, comments?
I did want to point out, if we could go over 6.01, general powers and duties, that is where we had the citizens' comments or the public.
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
Yep.
Well, I think we discussed this previously in terms of new community authorities. And should council be responsible for posting agendas and minutes of NCAs when they have their own obligations when they're created? And I think that's where we left it when we talked about these previously. I'm looking at Dave, but I'm also getting my...
And that was the consensus. Again, some of the comments we thought were great and we're implementing them as we come along. So an NCA is a separate political body. They're not the city. So I don't think it's in the city's best interest to take on legal obligations for an NCA that they have really no control over, especially in the charter. That was kind of the reaction we had to that.
And I had in my notes, not proper for charter, from when we discussed it the last time. And I think that's dovetails too with the prior comment from Mr. Holler about having everything posted by a time certain, which is just not, as a practical matter, not able to be always adhered to. And you don't want to put the city in a position where somebody alleges that we're not following our own procedures and brings a public records or sunshine law kind of action.
It's all the more reason to not to include it in the charter, because that's a procedural thing, not a policy thing.
I think that's fair. Good. Anything else? Anybody?
Discussion points, anything from the audience? So 5 and 6 were supposed to be meat and potatoes, so you guys are doing great, chugging along. And then we're off next week. So our next meeting will be on April the 8th, and we'll discuss Articles 7 and 8.
What I may do, I hate to make everybody come and then not even take an hour. Maybe we'll move a couple things up if it's mostly conforming changes and not much in terms of substance, if that's okay, just to keep it moving.
Absolutely.
Definitely agree to having it done sooner than later than
Yes.
being stressed and rushing. So
I will say that the outline that you provide beforehand and how you're doing that, I love it. It's perfect. The
Very
highlights, the brackets. For those of us that don't speak legalese every day. So I just want to say thank you. It was definitely helpful.
Is there anything else?
I don't think we officially need to adjust the work plan, right? There's more work on Rebecca
Review
to
what
have
you
this
give
stuff
us.
ready.
It's a plan. It's not a commitment.
It's a target.
Very good.
And we don't need to vote.
We were just talking about that. I think, did we vote the last time to approve the red line changes?
I thought we did.
We can.
Voted on like actual.
Actual.
Patients, but not, yeah.
like, whatever it was like.
City manager.
We probably should.
But we didn't go back and look at all of the red line changes and vote on that.
At the end, once we have all of the red line changes compiled, you're gonna do a motion and a vote to approve them and present them to council. So that'll be a global approval of everything. I don't really necessarily think you need to piecemeal approve what we talked about because there really weren't any major points of contention tonight, so.
And I will, as I say, I'm gonna be going back and forth just to make sure everything is syncing. So the next red line you get will pick up everything we discussed tonight, plus at least to date, all the syncing that needs to be done.
Some. Very good.
Anything further? We'll call for adjournment at 6:06.
Make a motion.
I never thought we.
Motion by Chris and second by Nancy.
Right, Ms. Heller? Ms. Crawford?
Yes.
Ms. Berger?
Yes.
Mr. Metz? Hochberg?
Yes.
Ms. Stark?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
7 yeas, we are adjourned.
Thank you. A great week.